My son Carson likes to run cross country. And it's one of his highlights of the school year when they're able to do that. And one of the things that's fun when you go and watch a cross country match is it's a long run through some crazy terrain. And there's different places we've gone to watch Carson run. But one of the things that's really interesting to watch, because usually as the fan, you can kind of run to different points on the course and watch the race taking place. And we're not near as wore out as the actual runners are. But it's kind of interesting because you can watch some of these runners because they'll be at a certain point in the race where they're just exhausted. But they're pushing themselves and they're pushing themselves. But there's something really interesting about every one of the races because it always seems like every one of the tracks, the courses are set up that when you get to the finish line, it's always like they have this turn that comes to it and you just do this 90-degree turn and then there in the distance you see the finish line. And it's interesting when you watch those runners run because it's like when they round that corner and they see that finish line, their eyes get big and it's like somehow, some way they find that extra turbo boost. And they, all of a sudden, it's like full on sprint, super power mode. And you're like, where was that for the, however, I don't even know how long your runs are, but however long that distance was, where was that? Because it's like you get to that end and they are with everything in them. And then you'll watch some of the kids that they get to the finish line and then they have tapped out every bit of energy they have. So they cross that finish line and they're wiped out. They're just done. But it's interesting to watch how they have that attitude. Or if you enjoy watching sports, if we ever able to have the Olympics this year, it's real neat when you watch track and field because the track and field racers are that way. It's something about they are primed and ready to race the race. They are going for the goal. They are doing everything they can to win the race. Now, as we see the approach of Jesus getting closer, we need to have that, hey, I'm taking that 90-degree bend and I see the finish line closer than it's ever been. And so I need to have that go for the gold, I'm in it to win it attitude and motive. Where I'm going after God with everything in me and the mission that He has for me with everything in me. I'm in it to win it. I'm racing with everything in me. Because, hey, getting to the other side of the finish line and then just being totally spent and wiped out and then right there on the grass, dead, exhausted, the best place to be. Because what's our reward? Eternity with God. In paradise, in heaven, with our Savior. In a place that He's been preparing for us. And just to do the weird God math, if it took 6 days to create the earth and Jesus has been spending 2,000 years creating heaven, if that same math all applies, heaven's going to be quite awesome. Because God is extremely creative. But that's totally a different subject. But we need to have that go for the gold attitude. Recently, I heard a preacher make this statement. Said, your last day is your most important day of your life. Am I ready for my last day? Because that last day is when we meet Jesus. So it's the most important day. How am I approaching that meeting with my Savior? Am I ready for that day? Now there is this reality at play for all of us. That we are accountable to Jesus for our lives. So, because of that, I want to approach that reality by giving everything I can for Jesus. I mean, Paul wrote this. He said in 1 Corinthians 9:24, don't you realize that in a race everyone runs, but only one person gets the prize? So run to win. Run to win. Run to win. Run to get the gold. But we're all accountable to Jesus. In 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 9, Paul writes this, so whether we are here in this body or away from this body, our goal is to please Him. Is that your goal? Isn't that a great goal to have? To just please and honor God. When I pray with my kids when they go to bed at night, it's like one of the things I always say when we're praying together is, God, may we just honor you in what we do with our next day. That we strive to please God. He continues, for we must all stand before Christ to be judged. We will each receive whatever we deserved for the good or evil we have done in this earthly body. Now, in the context of everything that's going on in that chapter as Paul is writing, it's this reminder that we're soon to be with the Lord. And that's very desirable. We're soon going to be with Him. And in fact, God wants us to be with Him, so He's preparing a place for us. So in that context, it's a positive thing. We're going to be with God. He's preparing a place for us. That's a great place to be. Yes, we're held accountable to God by how we live. And there's this seat set up, a bema seat, so to speak. It's the Greek word they use, bema, B-E-M-A. And in the Greek culture, it was a seat of authority, a seat of judgment, where I can just see the ruler just sitting down. You know, he's like got his subjects there, and he's just sitting down, being all formal, and he's just like hearing the case, and he's making his judgment against them. That's in their culture. In the New Testament culture, it represented a seat of authority. Because Jesus is an authority over us. He is the head of the church. And so He's an authority. So there's this sense of authority, this seat, where we approach Jesus as individuals and we're held accountable for our lives. Now, on one hand, that can be very sobering. On the other hand, it can be very celebrating. But it's that moment where Jesus holds us really in account for our lives. Now, we can approach that with faith or with fear. With faith of, hey, God, this is my life. This is the life I lived for you. Here it is. Here's what I've done. Here's how I've lived. And we can live it in fear of, oh my goodness, do I really got to go through this? Because, hey, let's be honest. If you have a job, how much of it do you like when the boss calls you and says, hey, come in for the yearly review? Most of the time, you don't enjoy that process. Because usually they're nitpicky on things that they don't even know what your job is, but so they're nitpicky on you. But in this situation, it's a positive thing. It really is a positive thing. Yes, it's scary, but it's positive. Because we're just coming before Jesus who loves us and cares about our lives. Now, this idea of a performance review, it's not like something just totally out of line in the Scriptures. This idea of judgment for believers is found elsewhere in Scriptures. In Matthew 25, Jesus is sharing a story about how the master returned to settle his accounts with his team. You can read about that in Matthew 25, or in Revelation 22:12, there's this idea of God giving to people according to what they have done. Or in 1 Corinthians chapter 3, Paul writes, we must be careful how we build, because the quality of what we build, the quality of the materials we use will be tested with fire, and some will burn away and some will remain. Now, this appearance before Jesus, as he's sitting there, he's not thinking, okay, Brother Robert's here. He's been a Sunday school teacher, Royal Ranger leader. He's been involved in the church forever. He's got a great story. He's been a dad, grandpa, husband, very loving, great heart. Let me think about this. Should I let him into heaven or not? Did he do enough good to offset the bad? Did he? Let me mull on that for a moment. And then there's Robert there just sweating. Like, oh, what did I do? Oh, and he's thinking back to third grade. It's like, oh, third grade. Oh, I knew I shouldn't have done that. Oh, man, there was that one time I snapped at my wife. Oh, what was I thinking? Oh, because that's sometimes what we're thinking. We're like, well, I'm sitting there. Is God in judgment on me? Is this about getting into heaven or hell? No, it's not. Because we're saved. Jesus has saved us. He has redeemed us. We're forgiven because of Him. And He's not sitting there going, well, I think I'm going to take my forgiveness back. You didn't cut it. Now, that's the way we treat things in our culture. But that's not Jesus. Because He loves us. He's already sitting there, come into your reward. I've prepared a place for you. So it's not about getting into heaven or hell. It's not where He goes over all our faults. Well, Mark, I like what you've done, but I notice you like to drive fast. It's not good. It's not going over all the faults. It's not Him there to ridicule or to critique us. But for us to give a performance review. God, this is what I did for you. This is what I did for you. Because I'm personally accountable to Jesus for how I live. I'm responsible for my actions. I don't have anybody else to blame. It's just me. It's just me standing there with Jesus. It's just my life. I can't go, well, my spouse, my dad, my great-grandpa, my neighbor, I can't do any of those. It's just me standing before God. My work is seen from God's perspective, and the quality of my deeds are tested. My life will be scrutinized, my actions and deeds and motives revealed. God recognizes my accomplishments for Him. I receive appropriate reward and recognition, potential honor. And I would imagine this. Here's Jesus sitting there talking, and I see this, me standing there before Him as He's going over, having the conversation. Hey, Mark, this is your life. This is what you did for me. Here's the stuff you didn't do for me. I'm just going to set that aside. Here's the part where you were building my kingdom, and here's the part where you were building your own. And He separates those things. And for that moment, a little bit humbling, where the motive and the agenda is established. But I imagine that it gets to the good part where Jesus starts unpacking. Okay, here's the stuff that you did for me. And then I have this sense in my imagination that there's a little bit of, because we have that heavenly perspective of, here's what you did for me. Here's the impact of that. Here's where you sacrificially gave and how it impacted a community and a world. Here's the part where just your loving service to others, how it had a ripple effect impact. And I would imagine in that split second that as the conversation is happening, it just ripples out and you see all of that. So while that's happening, Jesus sitting there in the judgment seat, me standing there facing Him, you standing there facing Him, the rest of us, I just picture this. We're not involved in it, but we're observing it. And then as He takes away the junk, pushes that aside, gets to the good stuff, here's what you did for me. Here's the impact of it. Then suddenly, as you see all of that taking place, then it's the ripple impact of everybody else seeing that. And then it just breaks out in, woo! Celebration. Because you realize the impact eternally of the things that you've done. But the humbling part is after it all takes place, will Jesus sitting there as He analyzes our life, as He thinks about our lives, will He stand up after He's done? And will He look at us and will He say, great job. You did everything I asked you to do. You went everywhere I wanted you to go. You interacted in all the great ways that I had for you to interact. You did it. I'm so proud of you. Good job. Way to go. Bear hug time. Or the humbling part. Willie stand up a little bit bummed out. And Willie just walk up. Just throw his arms around us. Just say, I love you. I gave my life for you. You're my child. Come into your reward. There's a difference there. On one hand, it's, you did everything that you wanted me to do. The other is, I've saved you, you're mine, I brought you in. So in that moment, it could be very humbling. Or a great celebration. But the reality is, we control what that moment's like. Just by our obedience to God. We control what that moment's like. And so, make it your passion to make that moment the best moment that it could be. Live for your last day. So that your last day, which is the most important day of your life, is your best day. As when you see Jesus, it's great job, well done, way to go. So, step back and think through your life and think through the pivot points in your life. Because we all have pivot points. We all have those moments that things are different. Now, if you can remember back, you had I'm a little kid point in your life. And then you went through the weird teenage years and that preteen year where your whole body is changing really weirdly. And it's really awkward for a while. And so you're changing, and then you got out of that stage, and then at some point your education career ended. So you had a pivot point. And so then you're young adult, you're single, and you have that phase of life. And then at some point, you met him or you met her. And there's another pivot point, and things change there. Then it just keeps going. At some point, this screaming little alien came into your life. And there was a change. And then that little alien became a big alien. And then they leave you. You spend all that time pouring into them. And then they're like, see ya. And then they're back. Yeah, can you get money? Can you fix that? No. But think about that. There's all those pivot points. There's your career or a place you're at a job, and then there's that change, and then there's a pivot point, and you switch to something different. So live to the point of, with every pivot point, you can say, God, I did what you wanted me to do with that chapter of my life, with that season of my life, through that pivot point. God, as a single person, I live for you with all my heart, but now I'm getting married, God. And then when you're married, and through that time, you're just like, God, I did what I could to be the very best spouse, to love my spouse, to love him, to love her, to give my very best to that person. And I invested in them. Pivot point. God, that little screaming alien's driving me crazy. Because that little screaming alien's becoming a teenager. God, that little screaming alien's becoming a college student. God, that little screaming alien is now becoming a parent himself or herself. God, but I did the very best I could to be the very best parent I could to pour into them. So from pivot point to pivot point, God, I'm giving you everything of who I am. And then, if you blow it, fix it. If you messed up, fix it. Go back and start doing things over. Don't just be like, blew it. But step back. If it's things that are fixable, step back and work at it and fix it. Because I want to bring the very best to Jesus. I want to bring the very best to Him. because my life's accountable to Him. So I want to give the very best to Him, just in response of Him giving the very best to me. Because He loves me and gave the very best of Himself for me. He gave His very life so that I could live. He gave His very life so that I could live with Him forever. And then He's preparing a place for me. I mean, the very best. So then my response, the very best response I can do is to come back to Him and say, God, I'm giving the very best of who I am back to You because You gave the very best for me. What a great way to worship our God. One of the greatest things about that moment when we get to be by Him is there's so much that we do and give to God that nobody sees or recognizes. There's things that we do just in love to our family, our Christian family and our personal family that they don't even realize, but Jesus sees it. There's things that we do in the church where it's like, yeah, Pastor Mark gets all the attention because Pastor Mark has the microphone. And so because of that, it's easier to see the things that I do and it's easier to see the things that I blow. But so many of us, there's so many things that we do that you think, well, why do I do this? Why does it even matter? Why does it matter that I'm vacuuming the carpet? Why does it matter that I'm coming up here on a Thursday morning ripping the plywood off of the gym wall and fixing it? Why does it matter that I do all that? But Jesus is there and He recognizes those things. So even though the things that we feel like are so insignificant, Jesus is taking note of. Because what might feel so insignificant to us, God's like, that is very significant. So Jesus is paying attention because He loves us. So every part of our lives matters. Every part. So make the most of it. Yeah. All of us can probably attest to the room. If I said, have you ever blown it before? Probably all of us can throw a hand in the air and say, yes. And sometimes I'd be like, double blown it. I mean, there's times I've blown it so bad with my wife that even in my apology, I'm blowing it even more, trying to apologize for the part that I blew up. I mean, we've all been there before, where you're making a bigger mess of the thing that you messed. And sometimes I think one of my spiritual gifts is just making a mess. I don't know if that's biblical. But yeah, if we can fix it, fix it. If you can't, learn from it and improve going on. So yeah, I might have blown some pivot points in the past. But that doesn't mean I can't readjust for the future. Because until it's my very last day, I still have days available. Until it's that moment where a seat is set up and Jesus is on it, I still have time. I still have moments to change and to do different and to do my very best because I want to hear Him say, well done, way to go, you did it. I am proud of you. And that's what I love about the heroes of the Bible, because Paul had that mentality in mind. Because he's like, I'm running to win. I'm going all in. I'm doing everything I can. I would much rather be with the guy sitting in that chair. I would much rather be with him. But until I'm with him, I'm going to do everything I can for him. Because I'm going to be with him. But until that moment, everything is on the line. I'm doing all I can for him. And may that be our same attitude and desire and passion. I'm not with you yet, Jesus, but I want to be. But until I'm with you, I'm doing everything I can for you because I love you so very much. So yeah, it can be a humbling moment, but it can also be the best moment of our lives. So let's make it the best moment of our lives. Let's make it a moment to celebrate. If the last day is the most important day of my life, then do everything I can to make that last day matter.